global issue. Girls are trafficked for the sex trade and domestic-related work, whilst boys are traded for purposes of hawking and for farming as well. At times, children are used as bargaining chips for the security and accommodation of their parents by landowners. Now, there's also still a prevalence of sex tourism locally and abroad, which is made possible by organised crime organisations, local gangs and corrupt police officials. Well, joining us to shed a little bit more light on this topic is Matipa Mwamuka, who is a counter-trafficking project coordinator from Non-Governmental Organisation based in Cape Town. It's good to have you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you, Leanne. Good morning.
Yeah. Could one say that human trafficking is almost another form of slavery?
It is a form of slavery. I'd say it's a form of modern-day slavery.
Yeah.
I think the manner in which it happens has just become more sophisticated. So it's no longer an issue where somebody's recruited and approached directly, but you're finding people are being recruited by means of the internet, social networking sites. So young people are becoming more and more vulnerable and falling into the trap of applying for opportunities abroad, applying for jobs over the internet, and when they land up in those opportunities, it's not exactly what it appeared to be. And so the means by which this is occurring has become so sophisticated with time. Yeah. So essentially it is a form of modern-day slavery.
It certainly was. I mean, when you look at it, slavery was abolished more than 200 years ago. But this...
That's correct.
You know, what's happening in the modern-day age, you know, I hate to say it, but it can almost give slavery a run for its money because it's happening to so many sectors of society, and with the likes of the internet and social media, you're reaching people that perhaps were never really ever going to land up in human trafficking if it wasn't for this. How do we try and get around this?
Oh, well, as you mentioned earlier on, it's a transnational crime involving both organized networks working across various boundaries. It's also, I think we forget that it's a domestic problem. So within South Africa, we probably have higher rates of trafficking occurring within our borders. So from one province to another, from one area to another within the same town. So we need to be mindful that it's both a transnational and both a domestic problem. And this is where legislation comes in. But not just legislation, also empowering and building the capacity of those who need to respond to the problem. So law enforcement, your social services, also your civil society entities to be able to detect the problem. But also, I think, looking at the root cause of the problem, we found that poverty is a major factor. So you find people who are vulnerable, who are coming from more impoverished areas where there's very little opportunity for jobs. Yeah. Educational opportunities are more likely to end up in situations of human trafficking. Yeah. But also you find in certain instances cultural practices make people vulnerable to trafficking. So in certain areas, aspects such as forced marriages are an instance which lead particularly young women and girls vulnerable to being trafficked into forced marriages.
Well, that brings us to our conversation now about what's happening in Nigeria at the moment. And this has got the world speaking. It's got the world suddenly sort of opening their eyes and realizing that this is not normal. I mean, we've got Michelle Obama in America who is driving this game. It's massive. You've got a lot of international celebrities, a lot of musicians, a lot of people that are speaking out against what's going in Nigeria. However, I'm not sure South Africa's saying enough. What do you think about this? I know we're being criticized about this.
I think what's come out of this whole situation in Nigeria is that it's galvanized both international communities as well as within South Africa, within various communities, to stand up for these specific girls and families who've been affected by this abduction. But then I think we tend to forget the fact that this is but one incident. The situation in Nigeria with regards to the violation of children's rights, with regards to abductions, is ongoing. It's been happening for several years. And we forget that it's just because it's happening in Nigeria, it's not a global issue. It's happening within South Africa as well. I mean, locally we see children being abducted and ending up in slave-like situations, being forced into sex rings. It's happening in the Western Cape with gangs forcing children into these situations. We see young girls being abducted into forced marriages.
Yeah.
So although it's been positive in, like I said, galvanizing people through social media, through marching and all forms of activism, I think we need to look at the bigger picture, which is the violation of children's rights, which is ongoing. It's not just a Nigerian problem, it's a South African problem. It's global, and what are we going to do about it? Once, you know, this blows over, unfortunately, are we still going to be talking about the violation of children's rights, and especially trafficking of girls and boys?
Yeah, indeed. Do you think this is too late, however, for the world to suddenly be waking up? Because we're having a look at, you know, it's been a long time now that these young girls have been taken from their from the school and have moved away from their homes. But now, what do we do in a situation like this? Because it seems like it's too late.
Well, I don't want to say it's too late. I mean, it would be a bit harsh to say it's too late, you know, not enough is being done. I mean, I cannot comment on the political situation. Each day we're hearing different things about where the girls are and what the situation is. But I think, like I mentioned before, it's raised awareness about the state or the situation in Nigeria, what needs to be done, the continuous violation against children's rights. Earlier on in the year, we heard about several boys, I'm not too sure if it was in the similar area, who were butchered and hacked to death, again by Boko Haram. So what does this mean in this situation? What does this mean about children being used as bargaining tools in a political situation? And I think we need to focus on that. But not just, like I said, in the Nigerian situation, what's happening in South Africa, where we're seeing children, again, both boys and girls, being forced into sexual exploitation through trafficking, forced marriages, forced into labor in the agricultural sector. So I wouldn't say it's too late. We need to use this as an opportunity to raise awareness and act. Have more tangible forms of action, whether it's strengthening policies or building the capacity of the relevant officials to respond to these sorts of issues.
Yeah, I'd like to just again bring up just kind of focusing in on this story, especially where we're seeing a response from countries like the US, who have actually, you know, they've sent a team in to try and assist with this situation. Do you think it's going to take a story like this as to what's happening in Nigeria for the world perhaps to open up its eyes and say, this is happening everywhere, and we really, really need to act faster, and we need to have better plans in place to try and avoid this?
Perhaps it will. I mean, like you have mentioned, we've got world leaders who are going on social media and engaging in various campaigns. Maybe this is what we need. But again, let it not just detract attention that it's been a problem that's not just happened recently, it's been ongoing. And I think that's essential for me and for others working in the civil society sector, to not just use this one incident as a means to act and then forget about the issue at hand, but I think it needs to be ongoing action and tangible action.
Yeah, that's the reality. I think we definitely need to see that. What is the role of the South African government in eradicating the plight of human trafficking here within our borders?
Well, I think there are various roles the government has to play, particularly with regards to protection, prevention, and prosecutions. So with regards to protection, we're talking about having various forms of legislation in place. You're talking about also having responses in place with regards to assisting victims of trafficking, prevention, also coming back to the legislation, and then prosecutions, having higher conviction rates around these crimes. So with those three aspects in mind, I think the government is starting to do quite a lot. I mean, we first heard or started hearing more about trafficking in persons post 2010, aligned with the World Cup. But as we know, last year in 2013 in July, the Prevention and Combating and Trafficking on Persons Act was passed. So I think those three pillars of protection, prevention and prosecution are three integral roles that the government has to play. And I think with the passing of legislation, it's a step in the right direction in terms of assisting and combating this crime.
What about ordinary citizens? Surely they can assist as well.
Yes, I think everybody has a role to play. I think very often we like to point fingers and say, why is the government allowing this to happen? You know, why is law enforcement allowing this to happen? But I think it starts at the most basic level. How much do we know as civil society members in terms of what trafficking is? Do we know how to identify trafficking? And this starts on an individual level where we need to equip and empower ourselves with information on what human trafficking is. So there are various organizations that work on the issues where civil society members can actually approach these organizations and find out more information on what trafficking is. You also have a national toll-free helpline where individuals can find out more information on trafficking, but also report cases. And so this is a toll-free number, and people can contact this helpline for information.
What is the number? Give us the number now that you're talking about it.
Yeah. It's 0800 555 999.
555 999. So that's a number that anybody can phone if they've got information, or even if they have been trafficked, and they can get some help.
That's correct. So it's a toll-free number, and it's 24 hours.
Okay. You know, I remember a few years ago covering a story here in South Africa where we were talking about trafficking, but we were talking about young girls that were trafficked within the borders of South Africa into prostitution. They were brought from the various provinces into Hillbrow, promised a life of a better education and great jobs and money and everything else. And they were lured into this life where all ties were cut with everybody, and they were, I mean, we're talking 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds. Our viewers witnessed this firsthand as well. And a lot of family members also selling their children into this form of trafficking. So, you know, those that you think you can trust are also, they have a hand in this.
Exactly. I mean, very often we think it's the organized criminal syndicates that are operating to abduct these children, to sell them into forms of slavery. But you're actually finding that it's parents, that it's guardians, that it's family members who are actually taking these children and exploiting them. I mean, very recently we found that within the foster care system, you're finding parents or guardians who claim to be foster parents who then remove a child from a situation of poverty, claim to be a caregiver, and while that child is staying with the foster parent, they're taking the grant monthly, and that child essentially becomes the domestic servant in the household. They don't get to go to school, they don't get to do the things that a child their age would be doing. And then ultimately they're enslaved in that situation. Yeah. So, you know, kinship ties play a big role in terms of levels of exploitation.
Just before I let you go, are there any statistics of human trafficking in South Africa? Is it possible to actually get statistics on something like this, which one can almost call an underground movement?
Yeah. Again, I think this is, where people continue to question the extent of the problem. I mean, the statistics we have are anecdotal. And remembering the fact that we only had the legislation on trafficking passed last year. So essentially what this means is that we have not yet created a coordinated data collection system. And this is still work in progress. So you find various departments, civil society entities have different statistics and figures, and they're not yet coordinated. And this is something that the legislation will assist those who are working on the issue of trafficking to do. So unfortunately, it's something I cannot give you, and we cannot say as we sit here, X amount of people are being trafficked.
Yeah.
But with stronger policies, with the legislation in place, this is something we'll be able to work on and do, I think, in the next couple of years.
Thank you for talking to us about a very difficult subject. It seriously is. Matipa Mwamuka, who is a project coordinator for Counter Trafficking. It is an NGO that assists in trafficking within South Africa and the continent. But there is that number. Please write it down. Diarise it. 0800 555 999. If you have any tip-offs, if you, by any chance, are a trafficked individual, 24 hours a day, this line is open. You can phone and you can report this case, and they will help you where they can. They really can. Well, we're talking about what's happening in Nigeria, and the latest news coming out is that Israel has actually joined the international effort to trace more than 200 schoolgirls that were kidnapped by Boko Haram fighters in the Nigerian town of Chibok. The kidnapping has sparked a wave of international outrage and calls for the release of the young girls.